Canada is naming 7 Mexican drug cartels as terrorist groups, making good on a pledge to U.S. President Donald Trump. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau promised a string of border measures to delay U.S. tariffs, including going after those Mexican cartels. It will now be illegal for these 7 cartels and street gangs to recruit, travel, and access finance. This designation gives law enforcement additional powers, including to track, trace, disrupt, and interrupt terrorism financing. Public Safety Minister David McGuinty made the announcement today, and he joins me now in the studio. Minister, it's good to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, David.
Normally, when we talk about a terrorist organization, we talk about an organization that's motivated by religion, political ends, or ideology, and a form of extremism. How do drug cartels fit into that category?
Well, these are international organized syndicates. They're multinational. They undertake activities that would be considered to be clearly by those folks who have assessed their activities, terrorist. They are engaged in some pretty brutal stuff around the world. So what I've done is receive from them, from our intelligence and security agencies, I've received from them the evidence and the recommendation that we move forward in listing these folks, these groups, and we've acted accordingly. And some 60 days ago, 2 months ago today, I committed when I became the Minister of Public Safety to give our law enforcement folks the tools that they need. This is another tool in their toolbox.
Look, there's no question they're transnational, they're criminal, they're violent. I mean, the stories you see coming out of Mexico are awful, but they're not ideological, they're not political, right? In the way we look at a terrorist organization like the IRGC or Hamas, other designations. They're purely criminal. So help me understand why terrorism laws are being applied more broadly here.
Because the professionals at our security and intelligence organizations, with Justice Canada's top lawyers, have recommended to me that we do. And so I've agreed with their assessment. I've looked at it. These folks are constantly moving in that direction, David. They're following these activities. I think one of the more important distinctions now that we've done this, we'll be able to follow the money much more carefully. And this is a very powerful tool for law enforcement. It's going to permit not only following the money, but also paying close attention to actors who might be cooperating or participating with these groups, which is another part of the web that exists both here in the United States.
But isn't that the very sort of activity that the proposed changes to the money laundering laws that were proposed, I think, in the fall economic statement and can't be passed because of the prorogation of Parliament, that those were intended to deal with? Like, not a terrorism designation, but, you know, strengthening the law to deal with criminal financing and money laundering. Isn't that what you're supposed to do with those changes?
We're doing both. And in fact, we're doing more than that. Just yesterday in Toronto, we had our 6 largest chartered banks meeting with my department, Finance Canada, our fentanyl czar, the RCMP, to come to ground on how the banks and financial houses, trading houses, will be engaged in helping us in stemming these activities. It really is now about going after the lifeblood of international criminal syndicates like this, which is money. It's money. Law enforcement's been telling me now for 2 months, nonstop, right across the country, that it's the money that will be the most powerful, one of the most powerful tools.
I have never seen, though, a conversation in Canada about designating the cartels as a terrorist organization until Donald Trump raised it and then demanded it. I mean, is that the impetus entirely for these efforts, or is this something that law enforcement have been asking your predecessors for?
Our security and intelligence actors are constantly assessing, David. And I've been aware of the fact they've been assessing since taking over as minister, but this isn't the first time we've had a conversation around Parliament in terms of designating groups like this as terrorists. Not at all. In fact, way back in 2004, 2005, as an MP, I spoke out about this and talked about not just these groups, but other groups that might be designated as such. So we're committed to giving as many tools as we can to keep Canadians safe to our law enforcement groups. And I met yesterday with our chief of police in the Toronto area. I spoke to the commissioner of the RCMP again about it this morning, and they are telling me, as frontline law enforcement practitioners, this is going to help keep our community safe.
So the money is what you've referenced that you're coming back to here, right? To sort of stop the money laundering, cut off access to finance, because they want to clean their money through banks somewhere. So explain to me how this designation helps you on that front, and what are the banks prepared to do to comply with this and help you in this effort?
Well, the banks will be compelled to do certain things in terms of tracking and tracing monies. interrupting money flows, identifying money flows. This is not only going to apply to banks, it may apply to other corporations, other groups. It's a complicated system, but it's powerful. I'm told it's powerful by our law enforcement folks. So we really, really hope, coming back to the core purpose here, we really hope this is going to help strengthen our border and, of course, make our communities safer.
But, you know, practically how much money do you think is being laundered or put into the Canadian banking system? You know, you've listed the 7 cartels, called them terrorist organizations. Like, what is the scale that you suspect the problem to be at? Well,
we saw one Canadian chartered bank prosecuted in the United States recently, and I think that involved billions of dollars and billions of dollars of fines. So I'm not in a position operationally to comment on it, like I wouldn't comment on anyway, the scale, the specific scale in Canada, but our law enforcement folks are aware, and FinTrack is aware. We've given them increased powers as well. So again, this is a problem. If you go to the lifeblood of the organization, it's always money.
Sure.
And so I think this is going to be very helpful in disrupting.
And I'm not trying to carry water for the cartels when I ask this question, but you know, the laws need to be broadly applied and not adapted for specific issues. I just wonder if you see this being the right. I mean, obviously you're going down this path of designating them a terrorist organization, but you know, we think of Al-Qaeda, Hamas is a designated terrorist organization. The cartels don't function like that. So what is the particular characteristic? I know the actions are illegal and criminal and vile, but what is the particular characteristic that makes it terrorism?
They're terrorizing our communities. They pursue aggressive violence. They kidnap. They traffic in people. They disrupt critical infrastructure. In some parts of the world, they take over media stations. These folks share a commonality with all kinds of groups that are designated as terrorists. And again, the independent, arm's-length folks that do this work in Canada have come to me saying, look, we've seen enough evidence. We've assessed this domestically and internationally. And we're recommending you move, and we've done that. So,
but some of those things, biker gangs do that, right? And they work on both sides of the border. You know, in Canada and in the United States, they have been implicated in murder for hire plots, for example, by foreign powers such as Iran. I mean, does a terrorism designation extend to groups like outlaw biker gangs?
The assessments continue constantly, and if the folks who pursue this under the criminal code come to me with recommendations that continue, then we'll look at those recommendations. If folks meet a certain threshold and meet the tests, and then we'll examine that very carefully.
So Canada's ambassador to the United States, Kirsten Hillman, was on the show yesterday saying that the U.S. recognizes Canada's progress in protecting the border, tackling fentanyl. I know it's difficult to be optimistic when things change with some frequency. What is your understanding of where things stand now with the U.S. on whether Canada's efforts have met the bar?
Here's what I know for sure. We're laser focused in our efforts to implement the border plan. I was at Pearson yesterday looking at our largest commercial center for CBSA, meeting with folks who run our largest mail sorting package center with 5,000 employees. We are bringing to bear changes that are making a real difference. To be frank with you, if I lifted my head long enough to watch the dialogue, I wouldn't get any work done. This is very much about implementing the plan, David, and we're really, really making progress.
But you must be having dialogue with your U.S. counterparts, right? I know the intensity of it. There's a shuttle diplomacy happening between Ottawa and Washington with, great frequency.
We are.
But what are they telling you on this? Because it seems like it's a constituency of one you need to convince, no matter who you convince at the cabinet and sub-cabinet level. What are people telling you about how the president views this right now?
What they're telling us is that operationally we're very connected. We've just launched a joint strike task force, between ourselves and with Americans. Very well received in Washington, very well received in the United States. I'm now speaking one after the other to the 13 U.S. border governors, state governors, to bring them up to speed on what we've been doing, talking about the specifics of border crossings in their states.
Right.
All of this is resonating very well on the ground, and it's filtering upwards. So we're going to continue focusing, like as I say, laser focused on implementing the plan. This is today's announcement is one of a series of measures we brought to bear in the last 60 days. I am convinced it's going to be a very big factor and make a big difference.
There was, as a final point, Minister, there was a new demand or a renewed demand today at the White House podium from Tim Walz, the National Security Advisor to the President, where he said NATO countries need to hit their 2% by June. They need to pay up by the June meeting, and the conversation needs to be about going to 5% of GDP spending on defense. That's $100 billion. I mean, that's fully 25% of the Canadian budget. I mean, what is your reaction to that comment from the United States? And it feels like it's going to be an endless series of demands from the Trump administration for Canada and its allies.
Look, I can't comment on the merits of that. What I can say is that tomorrow we're going to get up and take the next step on strengthening our border, because a strong border makes for safer communities. And so we're just simply moving forward, doing our job, staying in our lane, frankly, and meeting with our American counterparts regularly. And what we see at the working and operational and policy level, David, is incredible cooperation and integration.
Okay. Public Safety Minister David McGuinty, we'll have to leave it there until next time. Thank you for coming today, sir. Thank you.